I trust that you are well and that you had an amazing day and also a great weekend. All right, so today we are going to start with our grade 5 English lesson on personal nouns. And before we start with our grade 5 English lesson on personal nouns, you're going to log into a+students.ca. Once you've logged in, or once you on a+students.ca, you're going to log in with your username as well as your password. All right, then we're going to select the subject of language arts and we're going to select grade 5. All right, so once we have selected the subject of language arts, grade 5, and then we are going to scroll down up until we get to personal pronouns. All right. So our chapter for today is personal pronouns, and the lessons that we are going to be focusing on is choose between subject and object pronoun, compound subjects and objects with I and me, compound subjects and objects with pronouns. We will be identifying pronouns and replace the noun with a pronoun. So that will be our lessons for today. All right, so we're going to start with the lesson on choose between subject and object pronoun. Okay, so before we start, a pronoun, right? So a pronoun, it it's a word that takes the place of a noun or nouns, right? So instead of saying the person's name, or instead of, for example, making mention of a specific place or of a specific thing, you can maybe use words like it, him, her, she, me, you, etc. Right? So those are pronouns. So now we are going to also focus on subject pronouns as well as object pronouns, right? So if we listen to the word subject, then subject, it indicates, um, let's say basically the person or thing that you're talking about, right? Or referring to. So like if we now read the definition of a subject pronoun, then we will say that you can use a subject pronoun as a subject of a sentence or clause, right? It tells who is doing something, right? So the subject, it tells us who is doing something, who we are talking about. Um, Basically, you are referring to, let's say, a personal thing, right? So it can either be it can be I, it can be you, it can be she, he, or so on. If it's plural, more than one person, you can say it's they, right? So a subject pronoun, it's basically the subject within the sentence or clause, right? It tells us who is doing something. And it is usually at the beginning of a sentence. So a subject is usually at the beginning of a sentence. For example, you will either say I, or you will start with you. Um, let's say, for example, I and the verb, you and the verb, he and the verb. So it's like I did something, or you did something, or so on, right? So subject pronouns you usually find at the beginning of a sentence. And subject pronouns are, like I mentioned, I, you, he, she, it, we, and they. So usually it will be at the beginning of a sentence followed by a verb, right? And then did something, for example. So you followed by a verb. So the subject that does the action, right? And here we have an example. I hug Rick. I hug Rick, right? So the subject pronoun within the sentence is I, right? So I is the subject pronoun within the sentence. And the subject, it tells us who is doing something. So I hug Rick. So hug, of course, is the action, right? So I tells us who did something. So I hug Rick, for example. All right. Then, so that is the subject pronoun, right? And we said subject pronoun, it tells us who is doing something, and we usually find it at the beginning of a sentence, right? And we will find the subject pronouns being I, you, he, she, it, we, and they. So it will be the subject followed by the action, right? So the subject followed by the action. That is within a sentence. Then we have object pronouns, right? So an object pronoun you will find after an action verb. So we can use an object pronoun after an action verb, right? So which means that a subject pronoun you will usually find at the beginning of a sentence, but a object pronoun will you can usually use after the action verb within that sentence, right? And we can also use an object pronoun after preposition. So it can be after an action verb or it can be after preposition. And certain prepositions can be at, for, of, on, to, or with, right? So you can either find your, for example, the start of your sentence and then either your preposition and then you have your object pronoun, or you can have your action verb, then you have your object pronoun. And the object pronouns are, so the object pronouns are me, you, him, her, it, us, and them, right? So those are object pronouns. And like we said, object pronouns in a sentence, we will usually use that after an action verb, or we can use object pronouns after prepositions within a sentence. And prepositions are at, for, of, on, to, or with, right? And the object pronouns are me, you, him, her, it, us, and them. Okay, so if we look at an example of an object pronoun, right? Rick hugs me. So the object pronoun within the sentence is me, right? And as you can see, me comes after the action verb hugs, right? And remember, we said object verbs can be used after an action verb or after preposition. And in this sentence, Rick hugs me. Me is the object pronoun that comes after the action verb hugs, right? Another example is Rick smiles at me. So me is our pronoun, right? And it comes after the preposition at, right? And once again, we said object pronouns comes either after an action verb or it comes after preposition. And once again, a subject pronoun of a sentence, it tells us who is doing something and it is usually at the beginning of a sentence. All right. Okay, so if we're now going to look at a few sentences um, on both subject verbs as well as object as subject pronouns as well as object pronouns. We can start over here. We need to select the correct pronoun to complete the sentence. So we need to select the correct pronoun to complete the sentence. We challenge you to a game of table tennis. So we challenge you to a game of table tennis. So within the sentence, we basically have, let's say, two, right? We have maybe we have a subject pronoun, and you can even say that you have a object pronoun because there's one that comes after the verb as well as the subject that is at the beginning of a sentence, right? But in this case, we're only going to mention the one, right? Which means that we are going with we being the we being the correct pronoun within this sentence, right? So we within the sentence, it is a subject pronoun and it tells us who is doing something, right? So we challenge you to a game of table tennis. So we is the correct pronoun within this sentence, right? All right. Remember, we need to use the correct pronoun by either saying that it is an object pronoun, or a subject pronoun. All right, we are going to the next one. The mosquito buzzed around and then bit me. The mosquito buzzed around and then bit me. We need to say if this is either a subject pronoun or if it is an object pronoun, right? And before we decide if it's a subject pronoun or an object pronoun within the sentence, we are going to identify the pronoun as me, right? So me comes after the action verb bit. So we can say the action verb is bit, right? And the pronoun is an object pronoun, which is me. So me is the object pronoun and it comes after the action verb, which is bit. So the mosquito buzzed around and then bit me. Me is the object pronoun and it comes after the action verb bit. Going on to the next one. She convinced her friends to stay at the dance. She convinced the friends to stay at the dance. We need to choose the correct pronoun to complete the sentence. All right, so in this sentence, if we were to choose the correct pronoun, then we can choose the pronoun as she, right? Because she is a subject pronoun and it tells us who convinced her friends to stay. So who convinced her friends to stay? She convinced her friends to stay, which means that this is a subject pronoun. And the subject pronoun is she, right? So she, it tells us who convinced her friends to stay. So she is a subject pronoun. All right. All right, so that is basically subject pronouns as well as object pronouns. And if we just recap on what a subject pronoun is, then we can say a subject pronoun is used within a sentence to tell us who is doing something. And a subject pronoun, it usually we usually find it at the beginning of a sentence, right? Subject pronouns are I, you, he, she, it, we, and they, right? Those are subject pronouns. Then we also have object pronouns, right? And an object pronoun, it comes after, we can use it after an action verb or we can use it after a preposition. And the prepositions are at, for, of, on, to, or with, right? And the object pronouns are me, you, him, her, it, us, and them, right? So that is subject pronouns and object pronouns, right? All right, so we are going to do a test where we choose between subject pronoun and object pronoun, right? So here it says select the correct pronoun to complete the sentence. Dyed his hair purple for Halloween. Dyed his hair purple for Halloween. So we need to select the correct pronoun to complete the sentence. Is it him or he? So is it him, or he? So we need to select the correct pronoun to complete the sentence. Him dyed his hair purple for Halloween, or he dyed his hair purple for Halloween? All right, so we're going to choose the pronoun he, right? So he is correct, and that is a subject pronoun because he dyed his hair purple for Halloween. Do you think the judges will select her or will select she? We need to choose the correct pronoun to complete the sentence. Her or she. Do you think the judges will select her or do you think the judges will select she? All right, so we're going to choose the pronoun of her, right? And that is an object pronoun. Remember to tell your parents that you appreciate is it them or they. Them or they. So remember to tell your parents that you appreciate they or appreciate them. So we need to select the correct pronoun to complete the sentence, right? So we appreciate they or we appreciate them. This is selecting the correct pronoun. And in this case, it's going to be an object pronoun, right? All right, so we're going to say, remember to tell your parents that you appreciate them, right? And them is correct if you have that. All right, so now we're going back. So if you have them, wonderful, beautiful. All right, so before we go on to the next lesson, let us quickly go on to this activity we see in front of us. All right, so we have subject pronouns like we mentioned, and we have object pronouns, right? And then we mentioned like first person, which is like singular, which is like I and me, where you are actually mentioning or talking about yourself. Then second person is like we're mentioning, it's like you're talking about or referring to someone else. Usually it is you, right? It's referring to whoever that you are talking to, right? And then we have third person singular, and then it's the same with first person plural, second person plural, and third person plural. And these are all the pronouns, subject as well as object pronouns that we made mention of, right? So we're not going to do that activity. Let us go back. So now we're going on to the next lesson, right? Which is compound subjects and objects with I and me. All right, so we're going to now do compound subjects and objects with I and me. All right, so I is a subject pronoun, right? And we say that you can use it as a subject of a sentence or a clause. That is I. So I is a subject pronoun, right? You can use it as a subject of a sentence or a clause. It tells us that the speaker is doing something. Remember, I is also first person, and it's usually at the beginning of a sentence. So whenever you start a sentence, or most times singular, you can start with I, followed by whatever the person is doing, right? Because I is a subject pronoun and it tells us that the speaker is doing something. I am doing something. I, you understand? All right. And we have an example. I hug Rick, right? So I is the subject pronoun within the sentence, right? Followed by the action that I does, right? Or do. So I hug. So I, subject pronoun, hug is the action that um the subject is doing or the speaker is doing, right? So the subject pronoun I is the subject of the sentence. So it can be the subject of the sentence or the subject of the clause, right? And then we have me, right? Me is an object pronoun. So I is a subject pronoun that tells us that the speaker is doing something. And then you have me as an object pronoun, right? And you can use it often action verb, and you can use it after a preposition like at, for, of, to, or with, right? An example of this is Rick hugs me, right? So me as the object pronoun is after or is used after the action verb, which is hugs, right? So once again, the subject pronoun I, it tells us the speaker is doing something and it's usually at the beginning of a sentence. And then we have the pronoun me, which is an object pronoun, right? And that usually comes after an action verb or it comes after a preposition, right, within a sentence. For example, Rick hugs me. Me is the object pronoun that comes after the action verb, which is hug. Then we also have Rick smiles at me, right? Me being the object pronoun, which is after at, which is the preposition. All right, so here it also says that when a pronoun is connected to a noun with the word and, like for example, Rick and I, or Rick and me, it can be hard to tell which pronoun is being used. So then you can't say, for example, if it is a subject pronoun, or you can't say if it's an object pronoun because now, for example, and it's basically going to make it more tricky, right? It's like the test that we do. It is tricky. It is also kind of trying to trick us, right? So it can be hard to tell which pronoun is correct. To tell which one is correct, look at the sentence without the other noun. For example, Rick and I like the teacher, right? Which means that if you reread that sentence, Rick and I like the teacher, and then it's the same as saying, I like the teacher, right? But now you're just including Rick also, right? So in this sentence, it basically means that I is the subject pronoun within that sentence, right? It tells us that the speaker is doing something, right? The speaker likes the teacher, right? And then we have another one. The teacher likes Rick and me. The teacher likes Rick and me, right? Over here in the sentence, if we were to even take Rick away, then we basically just see how the sentence starts. For example, the teacher likes. So without even mentioning Rick, for example, because we just want to look at the specific pronoun, then we can say that the pronoun is me, which means that this is an object pronoun which comes after the action verb likes, right? All right. Okay, so we are now going to do one of the sentences, right? We need to select the correct pronoun to complete the sentence. So Mr. Duran greeted my classmates and me. So we need to choose between, is it me? Is it I? Who was being greeted, right? So we need to choose, is it Mr. Duran greeted my classmates and me, or he greeted the classmates and I, right? So we need to choose the correct one, the correct word to complete that sentence. So it's either I or it is me. All right, so we are then going to say that Mr. Durant, so me is definitely correct, which means that that is the object pronoun, right? So me being the object pronoun within that sentence. And remember, we said that sometimes it can be very tricky. However, just see how the sentence starts, right? And we say that if the sentence starts with the subject pronoun, and then we know it is a subject pronoun. However, if the sentence like randomly just starts and the pronoun is either after a preposition or an action verb, then we know that is an object pronoun. All right, we're going on to the next one. Where are we? Yeah. Shireen and who blamed ourselves. So Shireen and who blamed ourselves. We need to choose the correct one, the correct pronoun within that sentence. And we also need to say if it is a subject pronoun or an object pronoun. Shireen and who blamed ourselves. We either need to choose between I or we need to choose between me. So the sentence is Shireen and who blamed ourselves. We need to choose between I or me. All right. So if we were to choose the correct pronoun, we would choose I. So Shireen and I, right? It's referring to the two of you. So Shireen and I blamed ourselves, right? So this is a subject pronoun. So we will say this is the subject pronoun. So Shireen and I blamed ourselves. All right. The next one. The girls giggle with Rita and me, or the girls giggle with Rita and I. We need to choose the correct word or the correct pronoun within that sentence or that matches or that we need to add within that sentence in order to complete it. So the girls giggle with Rita and me, or they giggle with Rita and I. We need to choose between me or I. All right, so we are going to choose the girls giggle with Rita and me. With me and Rita, me and Rita, or Rita and me. Rita and me. So me is the correct pronoun, and we said if we were to use me, it comes after a me comes where am I? Me comes after the preposition with, right? Comes after the preposition with, and then it means that that is an object pronoun. All right, so now we're going to do a test on objects I and me. We are going to select the correct pronoun to complete the sentence. Mr. Thornton hired my cousin and me, or Mr. Thornton hired my cousin and I. We need to choose the correct pronoun in order to complete the sentence. So Mr. Thornton hired my cousin and me, or he hired my cousin and I. So we need to choose the correct pronoun to complete the sentence. All right, so if we choose the correct pronoun, then we will choose me, right? Because me is an object pronoun, right? Rena and is it Rena and I blend the milkshake, or Rena and me blend the milkshake? We need to choose the correct pronoun to complete the sentence, right? Also keeping in mind, is it a subject pronoun or an object pronoun? Rena and I blend the milkshake, or Rena and me blend the milkshake? All right, we're going to say Rena and I, right? And that is a subject pronoun, right? So well done. Shireen and I blamed ourselves, or Shireen and me blamed ourselves? We need to choose between a subject pronoun or an object pronoun to complete the sentence. Shireen and I blamed ourselves, or Shireen and me blamed ourselves? Keeping in mind, is it a subject pronoun or an object pronoun? I or me? All right, so we're going to choose I, right? And I is a subject pronoun that actually comes at the beginning of a sentence. All right, so now we're going on to the next one, that is compound subjects and objects with pronouns. So compound subjects and objects with pronouns, right? So you can use a subject pronoun as as a subject of a sentence or clause, right? And remember, we said that a subject, it tells us who is doing something, and it is usually at the beginning of a sentence, right? And your subject pronouns are I, you, he, she, it, we, and they. Once again, it tells us who is doing something, and it usually comes at the beginning of a sentence, right? For example, I hug Rick, which means that I is a subject pronoun, right? And then it is now followed basically after, um, and it's followed by a verb, right? Then we have a subject, no, then we have an object pronoun, sorry, which comes after an action verb, or it comes after a preposition. And the prepositions are at, for, of, on, to, or with, right? And the object pronouns are me, you, him, her, it, us, and them. And there we have an example. Rick hugs me. So me is the object pronoun, right, which is followed by or comes after the action verb, right, which is hugs. Then we have Rick smiles at me. So me being the object pronoun, which is followed by the preposition at. All right, then we say the object pronoun me is used as the after the preposition at. When a pronoun is connected to a noun with the word like Rick and I or Rick and me, it can be hard, right, to tell which one is a pronoun or a correct noun. And remember, we said that whenever we have a subject like that, right, then you need to see if, for example, when you're mentioning the two nouns, if it's at the beginning of a sentence or if it is, let's say, close to the end of the sentence, either after an action verb or after a preposition. So if the subject, right, for example, Rick and I, are at the beginning of a sentence, then that is a subject pronoun, right? It's a subject pronoun and it basically tells us who is doing the action. But if we have, for example, Rick and me, which comes either after preposition or after a action verb within a sentence, and then we know that that is an object pronoun, right? All right, let's go to our sentence. We need to select the correct pronoun to complete the sentence. There's only enough room in the car for, is it for him and Lucy or for he and Lucy? So we need to choose the correct pronoun within that sentence to complete the sentence. We need to choose between him and he. So there is only enough room in the car for him and Lucy or for he and Lucy. All right, so if we were to choose the correct pronoun, then we will say there's only enough room in the car for him and Lucy, right? So him being the object pronoun within that sentence, right? All right, we're going on to the next one. Shall we wait for, we need to choose between he and him. Shall we wait for he and Marshall by the entrance, or shall we wait for him and Marshall by the entrance? We need to select the correct pronoun within that sentence, whether it being a subject pronoun or an object pronoun. So, shall we wait for him or for he and Marshall by the entrance? So, if we were to choose one, we would say, shall we wait for him and Marshall by the entrance, which is an object pronoun, right? So him is an object pronoun and it is used after the preposition. All right, the next one. We need to select him or he. So him and Emmett took a bow after the show, or he and Emmett took a bow after the show. So this is at the beginning of a sentence, right? And if it's at the beginning of the sentence, then we said it is a subject pronoun, tells us who is doing something. So if we were to choose the subject pronoun between him and he, then we will say it is he and Emmett took a bow after the show. He is doing something, and that is a subject pronoun. All right, so that is compound subjects and object subjects, right, with pronouns. And we said that a subject pronoun, it tells us who is doing something, and it's usually at the beginning of the sentence. And our subject pronouns are I, you, he, she, it, we, and they. And then we have our object pronouns, right, which comes after an action verb or after preposition, right? And the object pronouns are me, you, him, her, it, us, and them. All right, so now we're going to do a test on the compound subjects and objects with pronouns. So we need to select the correct pronoun to complete the sentence. We need to choose her or she. So her and her dance partner performed beautifully, or she and a dance partner performed beautifully. We need to choose the correct pronoun within that sentence. Her or she. All right, so if we are going to choose one, let us quickly choose she, right? She being a subject pronoun, right? Him and Emmett took a bow after the show, or he and Emmett took a bow after the show. You need to choose the correct pronoun. In the previous one, if you said she, then that is correct. Is it him and Emmett took a bow after the show, or he and Emmett took a bow after the show? All right, so he, right, and he being the subject pronoun within that sentence. The crying baby clung to Ella and me, or the crying baby clung to Ella and I. We need to either choose between me or I being the subject pronoun or being an object pronoun, me or I. The baby, the crying baby clung to Ella and me, or the crying baby clung to Ella and I. All right, so if we are going to choose the correct pronoun to complete the sentence, then we can say Ella and me, right? Which means that that is an object pronoun, right? So that is an object pronoun, and it came after the action verb, which is clung, right? And remember, we said that object pronouns, it comes either after an action verb or it comes after a preposition. And then we have subject pronouns, right, which comes at the beginning of the sentence, and it usually tells us who is doing what or who is doing something, right? So those are subject and object pronouns, right? And just before we end off, right, we'll end off with identifying pronouns. So as much as we started with subject pronouns as well as object pronouns, right? But a pronoun, it is a word that takes a place of a noun or nouns. We have singular pronouns, and then we also have plural pronouns, right? And our singular pronouns, it either tells us about one person, place, or thing. And then we have our plural pronouns, which tells us about more than one person, place, or thing. All right, so grade fives, that is basically the end of our lesson on pronouns, right? And a pronoun is a word that takes the place of a noun or nouns. And then we also went over subject pronouns as well as object pronouns, right? We were able to identify words like I and me, right? And also the differences within it. So, thank you very much for joining our lesson. Thank you very much for being interactive. And I really hope that our next lesson will be as jolly as this one is. So you should have an amazing evening further. Goodbye.